At dawn, they sold her like livestock. Yevdokia traded by her own father to settle his debts. "Take her," he muttered, refusing to meet her eyes. "She is yours now." But when Duke Mstislav lifted her chin and saw the bruises she had tried to hide, his cold gray gaze darkened. "Who did this to you?" She said nothing. Silence had always been safer. That night, 3 men came to drag her back into the dark, sent by the very father who had sold her. None of them ever passed the Duke's door. So tell me, why would a man who bought a woman refuse to let her go? The morning Yevdokia Volkova's life ended began like any other. She woke before the sun, the way she always did, because her father hated to wait for his tea. The fire in the hearth had gone cold overnight, and she knelt on the stone floor in her thin nightdress, blowing softly into the ashes until a small orange light blinked back at her. "Careful, Golubushka." Old Praskovia, the only servant left in the house, set a kettle beside her. "You will burn that pretty hair of yours one day." Yevdokia smiled without looking up. "Then perhaps Papa will finally stop trying to sell it to the wig maker." Praskovia did not laugh. She never laughed anymore. That should have been the first warning. The Volkov estate was not what it once had been. Yevdokia could still remember when the halls smelled of beeswax and roses, when her mother's laughter rang from the music room, when servants in clean aprons hurried past with silver trays. Now there were 3 of them left in a house built for 30. Most of the rooms were locked. The paintings had been sold one by one, leaving pale ghosts on the wallpaper where they used to hang. Even her mother's portrait was gone. Her father had taken it down the night he lost the last of the silver at cards. She did not cry when it disappeared. She had learned long ago that tears in this house were a kind of language her father refused to speak. "He had visitors last night," Praskovia said quietly, pouring water into the cracked porcelain pot. "2 of them. They stayed until very late." Yevdokia's hands stilled. "Who?" "I did not see their faces, but one wore a coat lined with sable, and the other—" The old woman hesitated. "The other asked about you." A small cold thing turned over in Yevdokia's chest. "Asked what?" "Your age. Whether you were promised." Praskovia would not meet her eyes. "Whether you were untouched." The kettle began to scream. Yevdokia rose slowly. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. She walked to the narrow window and pressed her forehead against the freezing glass, watching her breath bloom and fade against it. Outside, the snow was falling in soft, patient drifts, the kind that buried everything by morning. She was 19 years old. She had never been to Petersburg. She had never danced at a ball, never been kissed, never been allowed past the iron gate at the end of the lane without her father's permission. She had read every book in the library 3 times. She had taught herself French from her mother's old letters. She had learned to mend her own dresses because there was no money for new ones, and she had learned to smile when her father came home stinking of vodka and losses, because a smile was the only thing that made him leave her alone. And now it seemed even that was not going to be enough. "Yevdokia." Her father's voice rolled down the staircase like a stone. "Come up. Now." She did not move at first. She stood there with her forehead against the glass and counted her own heartbeats, the way she used to do as a child when the thunder frightened her. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Yevdokia, go," Praskovia whispered. There were tears in the old woman's eyes now, and that frightened her more than anything her father had ever shouted. "Go, child, and whatever he says to you, do not argue. Do you hear me? Do not argue." She climbed the stairs slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. At the top, the door to her father's study stood open, and the smell that came out of it was the smell she had known all her life. Smoke, spilled wine, something sour underneath it, like fear that had been sweating into the wood for years. Count Volkov sat behind his desk in yesterday's shirt. His hair was uncombed. His eyes were red. On the desk in front of him lay a single sheet of paper, folded once, sealed in black wax. He did not look at her. "Sit down, daughter." She sat. "There is a man," he said. "A great man. A duke. He has agreed to take a certain debt of mine off my hands." Her mouth went dry. "Papa!" "In exchange." He pushed the paper toward her without raising his eyes. "In exchange, he will take you." Somewhere in the house, very far away, a clock began to strike the hour. She did not yet know the name of the man who had bought her. She did not yet know his face, his voice, the color of his eyes. She did not yet know that in 3 days' time he would lift her chin in the cold dawn air and ask her, very quietly, who had hurt her. She only knew, in that moment, that her father had finally found something of hers worth selling. And whoever this duke was, he was already on his way. She did not remember rising from the chair. She did not remember walking out of the study. She only remembered finding herself in the corridor with a sealed letter in her hand, and her father's voice still echoing somewhere behind her, soft and tired and final. 3 days, Yevdokia. He comes in 3 days. 3 days. She walked back to her room without feeling the floor beneath her feet. She closed the door. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, and she stared at the black wax seal until her eyes burned. The crest pressed into it was unfamiliar to her, a wolf's head crowned. Beneath it, in tiny Latin letters, 2 words she could not read without trembling. Nemo tangat. Let no man touch. She did not know if it was a warning or a promise. Praskovia found her there an hour later, still sitting in the same place, the letter unopened in her lap. The old woman did not speak. She simply crossed the room, sat down beside her, and took Yevdokia's cold hand in both of hers. "Who is he?" Yevdokia whispered. "The Duke. Do you know him?" Praskovia was quiet for a long time. "Mstislav Andreevich Razin," she said finally. "They call him the Wolf of Tver. Why? Because his lands are wild, and his temper is wilder. Because he killed 3 men in a duel before his 25th birthday. Because no woman who has ever entered his house has been heard from again." Yevdokia closed her eyes. "Praskovia, yes, child, help me. Please, help me run." The old woman did not answer. She only lifted Yevdokia's hand and pressed it to her own wet cheek, and that was answer enough. There was nowhere to run. There had never been anywhere to run. The estate was surrounded by 20 miles of forest in every direction, and the nearest village belonged to her father. Even if she reached it, there was not a soul in it who would dare hide her. That night she did not sleep. She sat at her window and watched the snow fall, and she tried to remember her mother's face, and she could not. Only her voice came back to her, soft and far away, singing a lullaby in a language Yevdokia had half forgotten. In the morning, she made a different choice. She did not weep. She did not beg. She rose before dawn the way she always did, and she went down to the kitchen and built up the fire with her own hands. She brewed her father's tea. She carried it up to him on the silver tray that had not yet been sold, and she set it on his desk without a word. He looked at her with the bewildered eyes of a man who had expected screaming. "Daughter, you will eat today, Papa," she said quietly. "You have not eaten in 2 days. I will bring you bread." She did not look at him. She did not trust her own face. She spent the morning in the kitchen, kneading dough with hands that would not stop shaking. She spent the afternoon in her mother's old sewing room, going through trunks she had not opened in years. A pearl comb, a pair of silk gloves yellowed at the fingertips, a small ivory miniature of a young woman with Yevdokia's eyes. She wrapped each thing in linen and tied it with string, and she did not yet know why. She only knew that if she was going to be sold, she would not arrive empty-handed. She would arrive with the only pieces of herself that her father had not yet been able to spend. On the second day, the snow stopped. On the second day, the messenger came. She heard the hooves first, a hard, fast rhythm in the frozen lane, and she went to the window in time to see the rider dismount in the courtyard. He wore black from his boots to his collar. A wolf's head was stitched in silver thread on the breast of his coat. He did not knock. He walked into her father's house as if he already owned it, and perhaps, by then, he did. She crept to the top of the staircase and listened. "His Grace will arrive at first light tomorrow," the man said. His voice was flat, bored, as if he had delivered the same message 100 times. She is to be ready. She is to bring nothing she cannot carry herself. She is to ask no questions. And if she refuses? Her father's voice, small now, almost a whisper. A long silence. Then, very softly, "His Grace does not entertain refusals, Count Volkov, neither from women nor from the men who promise them." Yevdokia's hand closed hard around the banister. Tomorrow, not 3 days, tomorrow. She turned and walked back to her room on legs that no longer trembled. She closed the door behind her. She sat down at her writing desk, and she opened the small drawer where she kept her mother's letters, and from beneath them she drew out a thing she had hidden there years ago and never told anyone about. A small silver knife, no longer than her hand. She laid it on the desk in front of her, and she looked at it for a very long time. She did not yet know what kind of man Mstislav Razin truly was. She did not yet know that the stories about him were only half true, and that the half no one told was far stranger than the half they did. She did not yet know that by the following midnight she would be standing in his great hall with snow still melting in her hair, and he would be looking at her in a way no man had ever looked at her before. She only knew, as she wrapped the little knife in silk and slipped it into the lining of her traveling cloak, that whoever came for her at dawn was going to find a girl who had finally stopped being afraid of the wrong things. Dawn came the color of old steel. Yevdokia was already dressed when the first carriage wheels groaned into the courtyard. She had braided her own hair. She had pinned her mother's pearl comb into it, low at the nape, where no one would see it unless they knew to look. She had laced the silver knife into the lining of her cloak so that the hilt sat just above her left hip, where her hand would find it if her hand ever needed to. She did not look at herself in the mirror. She was afraid of what she might see there. Praskovia came to her door with red eyes and a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "Bread," the old woman whispered, "and a little salt, and this." She pressed something into Yevdokia's palm. A small wooden icon, no bigger than a playing card. The Virgin of Vladimir, her painted face dark with age, her painted eyes sad and knowing. "She kept your mother safe through worse than this," Praskovia said. "Let her keep you." Yevdokia could not speak. She kissed the old woman on both cheeks, and she tasted salt on her own mouth, and she did not know whose tears they were. Then she went downstairs. Her father was waiting in the front hall. He had shaved. He had put on his good coat, the green one with the silver buttons, the one he used to wear when her mother was still alive. He looked for one strange moment almost like the man she remembered from her childhood. The one who used to lift her onto his shoulders so she could see the swans on the lake. Yevdokia. His voice cracked on her name. Daughter. She walked past him without stopping. She did not slam the door. She did not weep. She simply walked out into the cold gray morning, and she did not turn around, not even when she heard him say her name a second time, softer, the way her mother used to say it. Some things, once sold, cannot be bought back with words. The carriage was black and unmarked. 4 horses, all of them gray, their breath rising in white clouds. The man who had come the day before stood beside the open door. He did not bow. He did not offer her his hand. He only looked at her once, very quickly, the way a horse trader looks at a mare, and stepped aside to let her climb in alone. Inside, the seats were lined with dark fur. A small brazier glowed in the corner. There was a fur robe folded on the opposite seat, and a glass flask of something that smelled like spiced wine, and a single white rose laid across the cushion where she was meant to sit. She did not touch the rose. She picked it up between 2 fingers, opened the small window, and dropped it into the snow. The door closed. The latch fell. The carriage lurched forward. She did not look back at the house. They drove for hours. The forest swallowed the road within the first mile, and after that there was nothing to see but black trees and white snow and the same gray sky pressing down on all of it. She kept one hand inside her cloak, 2 fingers resting against the hilt of the little knife. She did not eat the bread. She did not drink the wine. She watched the light change through the window and tried to count the turns, the way she had read in a novel once, so that she might know the way back if she ever needed it. By midday, she had lost count. Once the carriage stopped. She heard voices outside, low and quick, and then the sound of a horse being ridden hard away through the trees. She pressed her face to the window, but saw nothing. When the carriage moved again, it moved faster. By dusk, she began to be afraid in a different way. Not of the Duke, not yet, of something nearer. There had been a second set of hoofbeats behind them for some time now, and they were not keeping the polite distance of an escort. They were closing. She heard the driver shout. She heard the crack of a whip. The carriage jerked forward so hard that she was thrown against the seat, and the brazier overturned, and hot coals went rolling across the floor at her feet. She stamped them out with her boots. Her hands were shaking. Not from cold. A pistol fired. Very close. Then another. A man screamed. And the scream was cut short in a way she would never afterwards forget. The carriage swerved. One of the horses went down. She felt the whole world tip sideways. Slow at first, then very fast, and she had time only to wrap her arms around her own head before the door above her burst open, and a gloved hand reached down into the dark and closed hard around her wrist. "Out!" a voice said. Low, calm, not the driver's. Now, quickly, she did not yet know whose hand it was. She did not yet know whether she was being rescued or stolen a second time. She only knew, as she was lifted bodily out of the wreckage and set on her feet in the bloodied snow, that the man holding her was not wearing a wolf on his coat. He was wearing nothing on his coat at all. The hand on her wrist did not let go. She was set on her feet in the trampled snow, and for one long moment she could not see anything but the dark shape of the man who had pulled her out. He was tall, taller than her father. His coat was black and plain, his hair darker still, and there was blood on the cuff of his glove that was not his own. Behind him, the carriage lay on its side like a great dead animal. One of the gray horses was still kicking. The driver was not moving at all. 3 men in rough furs lay sprawled across the road, and a 4th was running, half stumbling, into the trees. She watched a rider she had not seen before lift a pistol with terrible patience, take aim, and bring the running man down between the shoulder blades. The sound he made when he fell was very small. She began to shake. She could not stop. Her teeth clattered together so loudly she was certain the man in front of her could hear them. He could. He let go of her wrist. He took 1 step back, slowly, the way a person steps back from a frightened animal. He did not speak. He only watched her, and his eyes in the failing light were the color of wet stone. "Yevdokia Volkova," he said at last. Not a question. She could not answer him. Her tongue had gone to wood inside her mouth. He saw it. Something in his face changed, very slightly, in a way she would only understand later. "You are safe," he said. Quiet, almost gentle. "Look at me. You are safe." She looked at him. She looked at the silver wolf's head pinned at his throat, the only ornament he wore, and the knowledge moved through her like cold water. "You are him," she whispered. "I am. You came yourself." "I had reason to." He turned his head, a fraction toward the dead men in the snow. She followed his gaze, and she understood then what she had not understood in the carriage. The hoofbeats, behind them, the pistols. These men had not been trying to rob the carriage. They had been trying to take her out of it. Her father's men, the ones Praskovia had not seen. The second set of visitors, the ones in the sable coats who had asked whether she was untouched. He had not sold her once. He had sold her twice. And the second buyer had wanted to make sure the first one never received her at all. Something inside her chest came loose. It was not grief. Grief she knew. This was older and quieter and far more dangerous. It felt like a door closing. "My father," she said. Her own voice surprised her. It did not shake. "Yes, he sold me to 2 men. Yes, and these were the others. They were." She looked down at the snow. It was not white anymore. It would never look white to her again. "Take me back," she said. The Duke went very still. "To your father?" "Yes." "No." She lifted her face to him. She did not know what was in her own eyes. She only knew that her hand had moved, without her telling it to, and was now resting flat against the place inside her cloak where the small silver knife was sewn. "You bought me," she said. "I am yours. Then take me where I tell you to be taken. One last time. Take me back to that house, and stand in the doorway, and let him see your face when he sees mine. That is all I ask of you. After that, you may do with me whatever you wish." He looked at her for a very long time. The wind moved through the trees above them. Somewhere a horse snorted and stamped. The man with the pistol had dismounted and was walking slowly among the dead, turning each one over with the toe of his boot. None of it seemed to reach the place where she and the Duke were standing. "Yevdokia Volkova," he said softly. "Do you know what you are asking?" "Yes." "Do you know what I will do to him if I take you back to that door?" Her hand tightened on the hilt of the knife she had hidden against her own ribs, the knife she had carried for a husband she had never met, the knife she now understood she had carried for someone else entirely. "Yes," she said, "I know." He was quiet again. Then he did something she did not expect. He lifted one hand slowly, and with the back of 2 gloved fingers he tilted her chin up toward the dying light. She did not flinch. She had decided, somewhere between the carriage and the snow, that she was finished with flinching. His thumb moved very lightly, across the bruise at the corner of her jaw. The one she had powdered over that morning. The one she had been certain no one would see. His face did not change, but something behind his eyes did. Something that made the men in the snow look, suddenly, like the smaller part of what had happened on this road. "Who did this to you?" he asked. She did not answer. She did not have to. He lowered his hand. He turned to the rider with the pistol, and he spoke 3 quiet words in a voice she would remember for the rest of her life. "Turn the horses." The rider did not ask why. Yevdokia Volkova climbed back into a carriage that was no longer going where it had been sent. She sat very straight on the torn fur seat. She did not weep. She did not pray. She kept one hand inside her cloak against the hilt of her little knife, and she watched the black trees slide past the window in the falling dark. She was no longer the girl who had been sold at dawn. She did not yet know what she was instead. But her father, asleep in his green coat by a cold fire, was about to find out. The ride back was shorter than the ride out had been. She did not understand that at first. Then she realized the Duke's men were not following the road. They were cutting through the forest in a line as straight as a drawn sword, and the trees seemed to move aside for them the way crowds move aside for a funeral. Whoever Mstislav Andreevich Razin was, this was not country he had to ask permission to cross. She kept her face turned to the window. She did not look at him. He sat across from her in the dim, swaying light of the lantern, his gloved hands folded loosely on his knee, and he did not speak. He did not try to comfort her. He did not offer her the wine or the fur or any of the small soft things a kinder man might have used to fill the silence. He only watched her, quietly, the way a man watches a fire he has decided not to put out. She was grateful for it. She did not yet have words for why. When the lights of her father's house came into view through the trees, she did not feel what she had expected to feel. No fear, no grief. Only a very clean stillness, as if someone had opened a window inside her chest and let out all the old air. The carriage stopped at the foot of the front steps. She did not wait for anyone to open the door for her. She opened it herself. She stepped down into the snow without taking the gloved hand the Duke had offered, and she walked up the steps of the house she had been born in, and she did not knock. Praskovia was in the hall. The old woman saw her and made a small sound, half a cry, half a prayer, and dropped the candle she was holding. It guttered out at her feet. Yevdokia walked past her without stopping. "Where is he?" "Child, you should not be here. He has been drinking since the carriage. He is not himself. He is not." "Where is he, Praskovia?" The old woman pointed, weeping, toward the study door. She crossed the hall with the Duke one step behind her. She did not look to see if he had drawn his pistol. She did not need to. She could feel the way the air moved around him, and she knew with a certainty she could not have explained that he would not fire unless she told him to. That was the thing she would think about afterwards for a very long time. She opened the study door. Her father was at his desk. He had not changed his coat. The green one was open at the throat, stained dark down the front, and the bottle beside his hand was nearly empty. He looked up when the door opened, and for one long moment he did not seem to know her. Then he did. The color left his face all at once. "Yevdokia, sit down, Papa." He was already sitting. He half rose anyway, then sank back, his hands fluttering up to the front of his shirt as if to button a coat that was already buttoned. "Daughter, the men I sent, they were only to take me before the Duke could have me. I know. Yevdokia, you sold me twice." She walked to the desk. She set her gloved hands flat upon it and leaned forward until her face was very close to his. He smelled the way she remembered. Vodka and old smoke and that sour underneath that she had thought for 19 years was simply the smell of being him. It was not. She understood that now. It was the smell of a man who had been afraid of himself for a very long time. "I am not going to kill you, Papa." He began to weep. "I am not going to let him kill you either." The Duke did not move behind her. He did not speak. She did not turn to see his face. "You will sign this house over to Praskovia tonight. Every brick of it, every acre of the land. The notary lives in the village. He will be brought here within the hour. You will sign, and you will leave, and you will walk, Papa. You will walk, because no horse of this estate will carry you. You will go to the monastery at Optina, and you will take the vows there, and you will never write to me. You will never speak my name. You will never tell another living soul whose daughter I was. Yevdokia, I cannot. I cannot." "You can. You will. Because the alternative is standing behind me in this room, and he has not yet decided which of those two things he prefers." Her father's eyes lifted, slowly, over her shoulder. Whatever he saw there made him sign. She did not watch him go. When the notary had come and gone, when the papers were sealed, when Praskovia had been led weeping to the desk that was suddenly her own, Yevdokia walked out of the house without looking back a second time. She did not take the pearl comb out of her hair. She did not take the little icon out of her sleeve. She left the silver knife on her father's desk, laid neatly across the deed, with the blade pointing toward the door he had used. The Duke was waiting by the carriage. He opened the door for her himself. This time, she let him. She paused with one foot on the step. The wind had risen. Her braid was coming loose at the nape of her neck. She did not look at him when she spoke. "You did not stop me. No, you did not help me either. No. Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because it was not mine to do," he said. "It was yours." She turned her face to him then. She looked at him properly for the first time since the road. The gray eyes, the hard mouth, the silver wolf at his throat, the blood, dried now, on the cuff of his glove. "I am still yours," she said. "By the contract, by his hand. I have not forgotten. No, what will you do with me?" He looked at her for a long time before he answered. "That," he said quietly, "is the first thing in this matter that will not be decided by anyone but you." He handed her up into the carriage. He closed the door. The wheels turned. The house of her childhood slid backward into the dark, and she did not weep, and she did not pray, and she did not look back even once. She did not yet know what she would choose. She did not yet know what kind of woman she was becoming, or what kind of man was sitting in the dark across from her, or what waited for them both at the end of the long road north to Tver. She only knew, as the lantern swung between them and the snow began again outside the window, that for the first time in her life, the next door she walked through was going to be a door she had opened herself. And somewhere far behind her, in a green coat by a cold fire, a man was learning what it cost to sell a thing he had never truly owned. They reached Tver 3 days later. She had slept some of the way and not slept most of it. The Duke had spoken to her only when there was something she needed to know, where they were stopping, what name she was to give if anyone asked, which inn would have a room with a lock she could trust. He did not ask her questions she could not yet answer. He did not touch her again. Not once. Not even to help her down from the carriage. He waited for her hand to find his, and only then did his close around it, and only for as long as her foot needed the step. She noticed. She did not know what to do with the noticing. So she put it away, the way she had learned to put things away, in the small locked place inside her chest where she kept everything she could not yet understand. His house was not what she had expected. She had imagined something heavy. Black stone, iron gates, a place that matched the stories. What she found instead, at the end of a long drive lined with bare birch trees, was a low white house with green shutters and smoke rising in 3 thin gray lines from 3 crooked chimneys. A dog ran out to meet the carriage. A real dog, old and shaggy and missing one eye. It put its paws on the carriage step and looked up at her with the other eye and wagged its tail as if she were someone it had been waiting for. She began to cry then. She did not know why. She had not cried at her father's desk, or in the bloodied snow, or in any of the long cold nights between. She cried at the sight of a one-eyed dog in a courtyard, and the Duke saw it, and he turned his face away to give her the courtesy of pretending he had not. That was the moment, she would think afterwards, when she first began to be a little afraid of him in a different way. A woman came out of the house, small, round, gray-haired, with flour on her sleeves, and a face that did not bother to hide what it was thinking. She looked Yevdokia up and down once. She looked at the Duke. She said something to him in a dialect Yevdokia did not know, very fast, and he answered her in the same one, very short. And the woman snorted and turned to Yevdokia and held out a hand, thick as a man's. "Come, Golubka. There is soup. There is a bath. There is a bed that has not been slept in by anyone you need to be afraid of. The rest can wait." Her name was Marfa. She was the Duke's old nurse. She had raised him from the day his mother died, which was the day he was born, and she would, Yevdokia later understood, have walked into fire for him without bothering to ask where the fire was. She would also, within a week, be walking into the same fire for Yevdokia, and she would not bother to ask then either. That first night, she slept 12 hours. She woke to sunlight on a strange ceiling, and the smell of bread, and the sound, somewhere far below in the house, of a man's voice reading aloud. She lay still and listened. She could not make out the words. Only the rhythm of them, low and even, the way her mother used to read to her before the music room was locked and the portrait was sold, and the world she had been born into began, quietly, to end. She got up. She dressed in clothes that had been left folded on the chair, clothes that fit her as if someone had measured her in her sleep. She went downstairs. He was in the small library. He was reading to the old dog. The dog was asleep at his feet, and he was reading anyway, and he did not stop when she came to the door. He only looked up at her over the top of the book, and he marked his place with one finger, and he waited. "You said," she began. Her voice was rougher than she expected. She tried again. "You said it would be mine to decide what you would do with me." "Yes, I have not decided yet. I know. I may be a long time deciding. I know that too." She stood in the doorway. The dog opened its one eye, considered her, closed it again. "Why?" she said. "Why did you buy me?" "The truth. Not the answer you would give a stranger." He set the book down. He did not stand up. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw in his face something she had not seen in any man's face before. Not desire, not pity. Something older and quieter than either. "Because the man who wanted you second," he said, "was the man who killed my sister." The room went very still. "And I knew," he said, "that if I did not buy you first, you would not live to see the spring." She did not answer. She could not. She only stood in the doorway with her hand against the frame, and she felt the small locked place inside her chest opened one notch wider, and she understood, finally, why he had not touched her on the road. He had not bought a wife. He had not bought a bargain. He had bought a life, hers. And he had not yet decided what to do with the rest of his own. "I would like," she said, after a long time, "to stay here, for a little while, if I may." "You may stay," he said quietly, "for as long a while as you like." That was how it began. That was the first morning of the rest of her life, the one she had not known she was going to be allowed to have. There would be other mornings. There would be the morning she learned to ride one of his gray horses. The morning Marfa taught her to bake the black bread of Tver. The morning a letter came from Petersburg with a seal she did not recognize, and the Duke read it twice and put it in the fire and would not tell her what was in it. There would be the morning, much later, when the man who had killed his sister came looking for the girl he had been promised. But that is a story for another chapter. So tell me, before you go, if you had been Yevdokia, standing in that doorway with a one-eyed dog at your feet and a stranger's house around you and the whole of your old life burned to the ground behind you, would you have stayed, or would you have run? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone, and if this story moved you, even a little, please subscribe to the channel. Chapter 2 is already being written. You will not want to miss what arrives in that letter from Petersburg, or what waits for Yevdokia and her Duke when the snow finally melts on the road to Tver. Stay. The story is only beginning.